Hey everybody, so I have done a little bit of rearranging on my page. I have moved some things around. Mostly what I've done is I have I've moved my chart and my map to the second row. I have kept my, and I've opened up my first row for my annotated image. And I have, in that, I have gone ahead and given it a div ID. And the first thing I'm going to do is write an image tag, right? So I have to have a source image for this. My favorite source image, as I'm sure you guys know, is of course our lovely distribution image. And so I'm going to say image source equals, right? Go ahead and put that in there. Now one advantage with this is that if I do it this way, this will automatically stretch the height of my div to match the height of my whatever the loaded image is. So if I used a background image, that wouldn't work, but this will do it. You can see it's a PNG, right? Because actually the gray is sort of showing through here. And there wasn't anything there before because I hadn't actually put anything in the div, right? So that means that the default height was 0. So when I want to annotate this image, basically all I'm going to do is I'm going to insert divs. And I'm going to give those divs, I'm going to just tell the browser to do some stuff when you roll over those divs. So here I am in my annotated image div, and I'm going to say div ID equals hotspot1, right? Okay, and I'm going to give it a class as well. And I'm going to give it a class because I want all of my hotspots to look the same. Now I could write this in, I could generate this in JavaScript with jQuery, right? We've been over that a little bit, and we can perhaps take another look at that next week. But for the moment, we're just going to sort of focus on, you know, the functional way that we would do this to just get something on the page. So again, I'm going to say, so now, okay, I have a hotspot, that's fantastic, but I need to show or hide something on that hotspot, right? We're annotating this image. So now I'm going to say div ID equals. Now, this is the trick. It's not necessarily a tricky thing, right? This actually brings up something that is sort of yet another acronym that you all might hear at some point when if you're talking about or reading a lot about sort of program design. It's called MVC, Model View Controller. And one of the sort of principles of MVC design is what we call configuration oh my god, I just forgot the word. Convention over configuration. Okay, so what does that mean? Basically it means use naming conventions to your advantage. We can see that this principle applies to the designer of our responsive grid system because they've given us very sensible class names, right? I don't need to look up what the name of a 7 of 12 column class is. They've created a very straightforward, understandable naming convention so that I could just do that, right? I know that that's going to work because it's a sensible naming convention. So I encourage you to also apply this when you are creating div elements that need to work together, right? In other words, I need to be able to connect hotspot 1, which is going to be the visible area that somebody rolls over, with its annotation. So I can do that pretty easily by saying something like hotspot 1 note as the ID, right? That's going to give me a good way to use the naming convention on the thing that the person rolls over to grab the note that I want to show them when they do that. Okay, so you'll see how this, and I'll just give this a class of equals roll note. Okay, so this is where we actually now start to see the power of CSS. So I'm going to start with class roll note, and I'm just going to say this is my annotation. Okay, so I have two things going on here. I have hotspot1 note as my ID. I have class of roll note. Hotspot1 is the ID of the note that I'm going to generate. Hotspot1 underscore note is the ID of the note. And then I have these two classes that are sort of the generic things for that, for each of those types of things, right? One of the types is a hotspot, one of the types is a note. So I'm going to define my classes first, right, just to give them a little bit of substance. So I'm going to say class well, I don't have to say class, obviously, hotspot. And I'm going to say this is going to have a width of 20 pixels and a height of 20 pixels and a border, right? It's just going to be kind of a red box, 1 pixel, solid red, right? And I'm going to give this a position of relative, okay, which means that it's going to move, you know, when my responsive, and float left, right, which is a pretty standard thing because we tend to left align things, at least in English. So what this means is that by making it relative, it means when I move my grid around, right, that my annotation will hopefully move in response to that. So there's my hotspot class. Now I have my, what is it, roll note class. Roll note. And I'm just going to give this a background color of white. Maybe I'll give it a light gray so I can see it, right? And I'm going to give it a width of, I don't know, let's call it 40 pixels isn't very much, 100 pixels, and I'm not going to specify the height because it has text in it, right? So in fact, I don't even really need to specify this much at all. It will, except that it will tend to extend all the way out to the right if we don't specify some width. And in this case, I probably want this to be position relative as well, and also float left. Okay, so now the question is, what do we get? So we see here we've got the rollover spot, we've got the annotation, right? And we haven't really told them to go anywhere in particular, right? Which is why they're not going anywhere. But let's say we want to put it over, so we want to put it over this 50% range, right? So I can use now my IDs, the IDs of my two little divs, right? So hotspot1 and hotspot1 underscore note to position them. So I'm going to say hotspot1, very handy there, and I'm going to say top is negative 300 pixels and left is, I don't know, let's say 200 pixels. Now, how am I generating these numbers? Right now I'm generating them just off the top of my head. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here, we'll see how that affects it. So see how this has moved here? And if we are lucky, yeah, it's going to get a little weird as it scales, unfortunately. And having an annotated image that scales, this is where the responsive design can get a little bit tricky. Probably I don't want it to be as pixels, I would like it to be as percent. So I'm going to say negative 80%. And I'm going to say left as 40%. See if that works a little bit better. Now, how am I deciding which one's which? Well, we're looking at the top left corner here. That's going to be the point from which everything is measured. So if I say left, it's going to go, it's going to be from the left margin, and if I say from top, and then top is going to be from the top margin, from the top border. So you can see actually this does pretty well at keeping my box in the same place relative to the image. So, okay, so I've had to play around with this a little bit. I was getting a little bit stuck on why my hotspot wasn't moving the way that I wanted to, and part of this has to do with dealing with the responsive design. But basically, what I probably want to be doing is having my 500 is kind of a lot, right? Is actually having my height defined in pixel widths. Remember, so we can do this. We can combine these things and have my top and left. Sorry, my width remain relative, right? And this isn't going to be perfect. This I actually wouldn't really recommend this with a responsive design. This is sort of a poor example, but we're just going to sort of gloss that for now. If I can work it out better, I'll let you guys know. But I want to have I actually have sort of a few different ways that I can go about this, right? So the thing is that I want my hotspot and the annotation for my hotspot to be in kind of the same place. And so I can choose to do this either by just positioning them near each other. So I can just sort of do hotspot 1 underscore note, right? And give it a similar set of styles, right? And then it brings it up right next to it, right? I could do that. I could also create a container div, right, that holds both of these, and then just use that naming convention as a way to sort of turn this thing on and off. And we'll talk about a few, probably on Thursday, we'll talk about a few different ways to design this exercise, but because there really are multiple ways, and it's sort of up to you which one you end up liking best. But the one thing that we want to do here too is we want to put a display of none on our annotation. Why do we want to do that? Because we don't want the annotation to show at first, right? We just want to show the highlight area. And we probably want to indicate that this is something that can be rolled over. So we're going to add a cursor pointer, right, to that hotspot 1. In fact, probably I could add that to the hotspot class, right? And I could add the display none to the roll note class, because I want all of my annotations to be hidden at first, and I want all of my hotspots to have pointer cursors on them. So I do this, and I should get a little hand when I get over there. Yep, so that kind of says, click me. And now is the question of just adding the interactivity, adding the functionality, and this is where, again, our jQuery comes in handy. So I'm going to just create a function here. I'm going to call this annotate image. You'll notice that because this is just a raw JavaScript function, I haven't loaded any JSON or anything, so this is going to be one of those cases where I don't actually have any arguments going to my function, which I know is kind of confusing. But at this point, all I need to do, this is why jQuery is so great, is I can say, listen, I want you to grab the div called hotspot1, and I want you to add, is it mouseover? Rollover? I think it's rollover. Add a rollover function to it. And I can just come to my jQuery library here. jQuery rollover? jQuery mouseover. There we go. Okay, you're not always going to know what it's called, and that's okay. You can just, but if I Googled for that, I would probably have come up with some pages that showed how to do it. Now, as Chris mentioned, this isn't always the most helpful helpful documentation, but we can see how we can get a mouse over here. So I'm going to say mouse over, right? And then I'm going to give it the name of a function, show note. And I'm going to add another one, which is my mouse out, hotspot1 dot mouse out, right? Because I want it to disappear. Mouse out, hide note. Now, in point of fact, I don't actually need both of these, but we'll get to that in a minute. So I need to have show note and hide note. So I write these functions, right? Now, E. What is E? E is what we call the event object, and it's one of these silent, it's like the clap, right? It's a thing that we hear. It's that mouse over event. And one of the things that we can do is use this to grab some information about where that mouse over took place. We're not going to use that now because we only have one mouse over defined, but I'm going to show you guys in the next video how we can use this to our advantage. So basically, I'm just going to say, okay, well, when you do that, I want you to go to hotspot1 underscore note, and actually I'm going to use a shortcut here called toggle. Okay, so toggle is a jQuery function that actually lets us, it just automatically toggles the visibility of something when you roll over it and or roll out of it. So I can just use show note and hide note. In fact, if this is all I want to do, I don't really need both in order to get this functionality. Okay, I will see you in a few minutes where we look at how we can actually sort of scale and optimize this, and then we will take up the rest on Thursday.